Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
All right. Hello, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. What if the buildings we invest in could measurably improve human resilience? Today, we're joined by Dr. Esther Sternberg, physician, scientist, and integrative medicine leader, showing us how science can transform the spaces we live, work, and heal. Welcome to the show, Dr. Sternberg.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
All right. This is some really interesting stuff. Can you give us a quick background of how you got into that space?
Well, it's sort of weird because I started off as a family physician and then I trained in rheumatology in Montreal at McGill University. And as I was finishing up my clinical training in rheumatology, I kind of serendipitously fell into a research career because of a single patient whom I had seen who was being treated with a then experimental drug for a very severe and fatal form of epilepsy. And he developed an autoimmune inflammatory disease. And seeing then, that's
tough.
Yeah, but it's before the SSRIs. But that single patient convinced me that doing something to the brain could trigger an autoimmune inflammatory disease, and that the brain and the immune system talk to each other. And back in those days, that was 1979, the parent disciplines from which the mind-body science rose, neuroscience, immunology, rheumatology, endocrinology, didn't believe that there was such a thing as the mind-body connection.
Right.
And in fact, I had supervisors tell me, Esther, you're going to ruin your career by studying this.
Wow.
You'll do this when grass grows here on the palm of your hand. But I persisted and I moved to the National Institutes of Health, where I discovered that indeed the brain's stress center, the hypothalamus, was important in susceptibility and resistance to autoimmune inflammatory diseases like arthritis in rats.
And diseases in general, I believe.
Well, yes, but back in those days, that's what I was studying, arthritis in rats. Like it looked like rheumatoid arthritis. And when you can prove that in rats, and with your science background, then the scientific community sits up and says, oh, maybe this stuff is real. Right. And so it became one of the foundational pieces of the science of the mind-body connection. While I was at NIH, I started working with the then research director of the U.S. General Services Administration. That's the agency of the federal government that builds and operates and maintains all non-military federal buildings across the United States and around the world. 374 million square feet of office space for over 2 million office workers.
Wow.
And Kevin Kampscher, that he was then the research director at the GSA, came to me at NIH and said, can you help me measure the impacts of these office spaces that I'm designing and operating on the health and well-being of the people in them? Like, what a novel idea.
Right.
You want to keep your people happy and healthy. That was back in the year 2000 when, frankly...
Do you know what inspired him to come to you in the first place?
Well, yeah, we were both working for different federal agencies, and we were at a conference, at a neuroscience conference, in fact, in San Diego. Okay. And we were sitting at a bar waiting for our table at a restaurant. We were with a group of people and other people attending the conference. And
it's the whole point of conferences, right? You get people together and start talking.
At the bar, yeah. So he said, I really need somebody who knows something about stress. And that's what I was studying, to help me measure the impacts of these spaces, because I want the spaces to not stress people. Now, back in the year 2000, that was not at the top of the spreadsheet of major companies, keep people happy and less stressed. They were trying to squeeze as many people into office spaces as possible. So we began this what became over 25-year research studies using wearable health tracker devices and linking the health data with continuous measurement of up to 11 different environmental attributes: light, sound, volatile organic compounds, carbon dioxide, temperature, humidity, and so on. And I continued that work when Dr. Andrew Weil recruited me to the University of Arizona to create a research program for the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine here in Tucson. And I brought that work with me, and we eventually, by 2020, had published a series of papers where we had very granular data showing optimal environmental features that keep people less stressed, more resilient, sleep better, less fatigued, better cognitive performance. And, we could say 45% relative humidity is optimal for reducing stress, that kind of thing. How much light do you need in the morning in order to sleep better at night? How much more do you need to move around in order to sleep better at night and be less stressed, and so on? And we base this not only on subjective feelings of stress, because most people aren't aware of how the built environment affects their physiological...
We are not in touch with our bodies.
Right. How it affects their physiological stress response. Mm-hmm. So I wear this ring. I'm sure you're wearing watches. There's all kinds of devices to track the stress response, sleep, movement, and so on. Well, that became very important with COVID. What happened with COVID is people suddenly began to realize how important the built environment is for health, because you saw all these images on the internet of the virus spreading through ventilation systems and so on. And of course, ventilation is really important for health, to keep the air clean, frequent fresh air turnover, excellent filtration. But what we'd done, and what my latest book, Well at Work, Creating Well-Being in Any Workspace, talks about, is how do you go beyond that? You have to start with clean air, with no toxins, no allergens, no viruses, and so on. But how do you create spaces that help people flourish, that help people thrive, that help people maintain resilience and be their optimal self and be happy? So at that point, Kevin Kamsher had by then become Director of High Performance Federal Green Buildings for the GSA, Chief White House Sustainability Officer for the GSA, and he was in a position to implement our research findings in these workspaces. So that really, we were able to quickly implement and changes to help people be well in their workspaces. That applies to wherever you work, home, wherever you learn, wherever you live, and so on. We then took that data into the design and operation of the new Andrew Weil Integrative Medicine Center building complex. We have 3 buildings. When Dr. Weil got the go-ahead to build these buildings, it was 2019. And he asked me to convene a committee of architects, building science experts, to help embed the 7 domains of integrative health into these buildings. And we worked with the architects, Line and Space, and they were very open to this sort of co-creation and iteration of these buildings, and we were able to be to embed features that help people with the 7 domains of integrative health. So, what are the 7 domains? Sleep, resilience, which is the stress and relaxation response, how quickly you bounce back from any challenge. The environment, which includes clean air, but also the green environment. Movement, relationships, nutrition, and spirituality. So we have 3 buildings: the mind building, the body building, also called the Candor building because of a generous donation, and the spirit building. And we now the buildings have won many awards, international awards, the Ideas Award 2026, the American Institute of Architects Award, and so on, for really creating workspaces that enhance not only physical health, but emotional well-being.
Okay, very
That's
interesting.
the story.
There's a lot there. Let's unpack a little of that. So, some of these influences are maybe a little more present already in Eastern cultures. Can you speak to that a little
Yes,
bit?
that's really interesting. My previous book, Healing Spaces, The Science of Place and Well-Being, was translated into Chinese, and the title is Feng Shui. So, and in that book, and a little bit in Well at Work, I discuss the comparison between Feng Shui and what we're talking about. So, there are certainly elements of Feng Shui that you could explain from a neuroscience point of view why people feel comfortable in those spaces. You know, an open vista, held in the arms of mountains behind. You feel comfortable. You see the rivers, the flow of the waters. So there's a lot of science in there that can explain why Feng Shui is beneficial to health and well-being.
Okay. And is it just modern building practices that sort of and cost that left those sort of factors behind? And like, what is that, 100, 200 years ago?
Yes, yes. So when Kevin Campshire and I first started to pitch these ideas to the private sector, we talked to the C-suite of various organizations, and they were very, very excited and said, "Yes, we want our workers to be happy and healthy. What can you do for $5,000?"
Right.
Oh, you can't do anything for $5,000.
Right.
Until COVID, it was not at the top of the spreadsheet of the budget spreadsheets.
And so
When
that
COVID
was,
happened,
go
it
ahead.
really, really brought the importance of the built environment. We spend over 90% of our time indoors. So it is essential that we create indoor spaces for health and well-being. You were going to say something there?
Well, yeah. So has that been a challenge to bring forth some data maybe that helps sell it to the bottom line of companies to show them how much more productive their people
Yes.
can be when they're not just healthy, but also inspired or
Yes.
more energy, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and there are a number of organizations that are doing and have done return on investment for well-being. The U.S. General Service, the U.S. GBC, and its healthy building arm, all caps, WELL, has done a lot of reviews and assessment. Other companies, HKS, big architecture firms, have published on the return on investment for creating such healthy buildings, and it comes out to about over $3,000 per employee over a 10-year span for the building. So one of the issues here in the United States is it costs more upfront to build a healthy well-being building.
Right.
And often the organization or the organization that builds the building, the developers, don't see the 10-year benefit. It's the companies that are renting that space that see the 10-year benefit. Now, I was in Australia. I did a 5-city tour in Australia, and that was different because, for example, a hospital in Australia is built by the federal government, and they saw the advantage of spending more upfront in order to save more down the line. So there's structural issues and challenges to spending more money, but I think there's now more and more an economic case to show that it's really in millions of dollars that you can save, and as I said, thousands per employee. So, for example, there's studies that show that poor sleep for any reason, whether it's that you have sleep apnea, and in our case, we found in these buildings that the people who moved less were more stressed in the evening when they went home, physiologically stressed.
Yep.
And they slept poorer, and they woke up the next day more fatigued. So the physical environment can impair your sleep quality at night if you're not exposed to full spectrum sunlight or in the early morning and throughout the day. So the return on investment for poor sleep can be over $3,000 cost per employee if they have any problem with sleep. So to the extent that you can design the buildings in order to enhance all aspects of well-being, health and well-being, there will be cost benefits. And the other thing is that, I wrote an op-ed piece for the Arizona Daily Star when, right after COVID, when all these organizations were, were mandating people back to work. I said, I live about 10 or 20 minutes from 5 world-class spas. Nobody is mandating people to go to those spas. People go to those spas because they are designed and operated to attract people there. I'm not saying that you should design an FBI building for like a spa, but you can design buildings to enhance all these aspects of health and well-being and to attract people there so that they are happy and healthy in those spaces.
Sure. Kind of tourism in general, right? I mean, people go to beautiful cities, so they're attracted to it, right? They want to go check it out and be around it.
Well, yeah, and actually in both books, I talk about Disney and the Disney Imagineers in the 1950s, who, based on their experience in movie set design, created theme parks to attract people to them in very granular ways by modifying the environment. What you heard, what you smelled, what you saw, even the texture of the street underneath your feet. They're really, really detailed. I had a behind-the-scenes tour of Disneyland from the then vice president of Disney Imagineering back before I wrote the book in 2009, Healing Spaces. But so the entertainment industry, the resort industry, they all know how to do this. And so actually the shopping industry, you mentioned you're from Minnesota and the Mall of America, these places are designed to attract people and to guide people around them in the way that the organization wants. Right. So there's no reason to not do that for office spaces. There's simple things like, we found that open office design, people in open office design moved more during the day than people in cubicles or private offices. It could be up to 1,000 steps more a day without even realizing it. You don't have to go to the gym. You just go to your office and you end up walking more. It's a little bit of a misnomer, open office design, because that gives you the impression that it's a bunch of desks in a barn. But really when that was designed mid-century by Robert Props, those kind of offices, they were called active office design, so that you move to different places to do different activities. And that's what helps you move more. Now, when we published the paper in 2018 showing that open office design was healthier with less stress, better sleep quality, less fatigue the next day, more movement, there was a hue and cry on the internet because people hate their open office design. Now, why do they hate their open office design? It's because of the noise. Well, it's not rocket science to start when you're designing a building with acoustical engineers, or at least all architects know that every material that's put in a building has an acoustical rating. And you can make sure that these spaces that are open are quiet. And that's what we did in the Andrew Weil Center for Integrative Medicine. We have ceiling baffles on the ceiling. We have carpets and features that mitigate noise.
Right. Okay. Can you speak a little bit about sort of the results you were able to achieve on the federal offices that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah. So as I said, we found these features, and so there are others. For example, Mariana Figuero, who was working alongside our studies on lighting, and it's important to have early morning sunlight. 30 minutes of early morning sunlight between 8 a.m. and 12 noon helps you sleep better at night. You fall asleep faster, you sleep better, and you're in a better mood the next morning. She worked with the Navy and with submariners who couldn't have windows. So the obvious solution is windows, right? Glass walls. Well, I'll talk about that in a minute. For the desert, it's a little bit of an issue, but but so if you don't have the luxury of having windows with sunlight, or that the building doesn't have a narrow enough footprint that the sunlight penetrates to everybody in the office, you can substitute full spectrum sunlight boxes on the desk. So one of the solutions, if you already have a building that's built that doesn't have these features, the solutions are to create your own individualized spaces that have optimal lighting, optimal humidity with a desk humidifier. They're also for temperature. It's really hard to have one temperature. Thermostat wars, right?
Yep.
One temperature does not fit all. There's now an industry of office chairs that have warming seats or cooling seats. There are people looking into materials for the walls and so on that can absorb humidity or not, depending upon where you are. So there's local solutions, even if you're not going to tear down a building because it doesn't have.
Right. You can retrofit it with a lot of tech, which is nice.
Yeah, a lot of tech, and that goes for sound as well. To speak to, we wanted, for the Andrew Weil Center, we wanted the light the circadian sunlight to penetrate to everyone in the spaces. So Line and Space, the architects designed the buildings as narrow, with a narrow footprint to allow the light to enter. And we wanted glass walls. And, when we had our advisory committee, the first thing that the architects and that my GSA colleagues said, well, you can't build a glass box in the desert. It's going to, heat up. But there are solutions to that. High performance glass to reduce the heat gain. External shades. We have these beautiful external shades, rusted shades that are angled just to the right angle of the sun to give maximum shade. And then we have mesquite trees on the southern wall, which they're amazing. They've grown now. It's a 3-story building, and they've grown since 2024 when we moved in to reach almost the 3rd story.
Wow.
Now there's an interesting story with that, because we wanted mesquite trees because they're native to the desert and they grow quickly and they provide shade. But when we were doing a walkthrough, we saw that that they had put facilities folks had put ironwood trees, which are small and they don't grow quickly. And we said, "What's going on here?" We asked for mesquite trees, and they said, "Well, the problem is mesquite trees drop pods, and if you want to pick up the pods and make maybe mesquite flour, that's up to you. But it's too much work, for facilities folks to be going around picking up pods all the time." So the architects found low pod or no pod mesquite trees. So, there's always a solution to an issue if you want to have health and well-being foremost. You can make these decisions based on putting the health and the well-being and the experience of the occupant first, rather than putting money saving or time saving first. And in the end, you get money saving and time saving.
Right. It's an investment.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Speaking of investments, that's kind of my jam is real estate. What are the challenges in trying to get some of this into, for example, apartments and multifamily designs?
Well, more and more companies are looking at this. It is spreading. So my philosophy when I worked at NIH and worked with the GSA, if you can make a case in your, in a controllable space, right? The federal government buildings were spaces that we had control over, that we could measure. If you can make a good business case with data in those spaces, then the people who are building other kinds of buildings are going to use that data to enhance their spaces. So, for example, we're working with a Catholic high school here in Tucson, South Point, and they've taken those principles into the design of their wellness center, and actually the whole school. I mean, it's a very stressful thing to be a teacher and a student in schools nowadays. I've been asked, so I have to say that since September 2025, I retired from my research director position at the center.
Congrats.
Thank you. And I have established my own company, Star Mountain LLC. And the reason is I was getting so many requests to consult on designing all kinds of spaces, from hotels to developers to homes to schools, as I said. And I kind of reached the maximum of how much consulting you could do at the university. So I have turned around and I am still working with the Andrew Weil Center, consulting to them on several projects related to the building complex, because, you know, it is ongoing. And
you started your own entrepreneurial side, doing it for other people.
I did. I'm having a ball. I'm just having so much fun. Cool. And it's people all over the world, I have to say. I get calls from the UK, from Sweden, South Africa, really all over the world, that people are really, organizations are really wanting to know how to attract their people back to these you know, monumental castles in the air, you know, that are already built.
Right.
And how do you keep them happy and healthy and have a beneficial bottom line? So, you know, one of the things that we did with the Andrew Weil Center, again, using it as a research tool to get data to say that this is important to design spaces for health and well-being. We did pre-post occupancy surveys, and the data shows that the buildings operate as well, if not better, in most domains compared to where people were working before, which was home, because it was during COVID. Much better than when they were working in the previous office spaces. And the interesting thing is that the way that the buildings operate best are bringing people together. So connection to colleagues, connection to the organization, and connection to the community. And right. Post-COVID, that became a real existential crisis for organizations. Why do we need an office space? We can be just as efficient working from home, right? The problem with continuously working from home is you get video meeting burnout, you know, Zoom burnout. You get lonely. You can get depressed. You're moving less. Whereas when you go to a common space, you feel connected. You're nourished by those relationships, which is a very important element of integrative health. And you feel more connected to that organization and to the community. So that's really the reason to have common office spaces now. And to the extent that you can design those spaces to enhance the experience of people in them, they will want to go to those spaces. So we have people who say that they come 5 days a week, even though they can work from home 2 days a week, but they love working there. We have students who come from other buildings in the university just to sit in our lobby because they love to sit there.
That's good. Yeah, good spot to read or study.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that's another testament to it. And it's got to be rewarding to see the impact on everybody's health and lives and productivity in businesses, and to see that's a strong legacy. Congratulations on all that.
Thank you. No, it is very rewarding, and it's rewarding, especially when I see individuals who are on purpose walking through our desert garden. So the other element, when people think about an office space, you think about indoors, but it's very important to have outdoor spaces where people can be in nature, can walk in nature, can walk together with colleagues in nature. And so there's desert gardens around the buildings. We have a QR code guided walk with talking about different medicinal plants named for our former executive director, Dr. Victoria Mazes. The buildings are connected to a local park where often we have drumming. So I mean, the mission of the Andrew Weil Center is integrative health. So we do all these things, meditation and yoga and Tai Chi and drumming. Teaching kitchen, there's a teaching kitchen for healthy nutrition. But I was standing in front of the Mind building, and a whole lot of people were walking from there's a multi-story garage next door, and people used to walk to the campus across the parking lot, but instead they cut through our gardens. And I stopped people. I stopped one of the actual directors at the university, and I said, why are you doing this? She said, oh, because it's just so wonderful to start the day walking through these gardens. And so that to me is the most rewarding thing, to hear individuals tell me how much they enjoy being there. We have for supporting the spiritual aspect of integrative health. In the lobby, we have a continuous reel on a wall, sort of a wall video by Louis Schwartzberg, who's a well-known Hollywood producer who did Fantastic Fungi movie. And he does sort of stop motion, micro to macro. And
that's cool.
So people sit in these wonderfully comfortable orange ergonomic chairs, and they just sit there and they look at this. It's very hypnotic. And that's important. It's important to take moments throughout the day to go offline, to just chill, Yeah. And even you don't have to be saying to meditate, but it is effectively meditating. We have what we call a recharge room there, which was created by Morel Phillips, who started a studio in New York City called Studio Elsewhere. I tell the story in the book, in Well at Work, where she was in the video game industry and had a severe accident, had neurotrauma, and read my previous book, Healing Spaces, and had an aha moment and decided that when she healed, when she got better and out of the hospital, she would turn her expertise to creating immersive nature spaces, because while she was in hospital, she was desperate to be in nature and she couldn't be in nature. And so she has these rooms where they're sort of darkened rooms, and the wall is lit up with about 8 different choices of places that you might want to go: a quiet mountain lake, a seashore, and you call out elsewhere, take me to a quiet mountain lake, and all of a sudden the whole wall lights up and you hear the birds chirping and the water lapping, and you can just chill again. Now, she created this in 2019, and then in New York City in 2020, COVID happened. And she realized that she was at ground zero for suicidality, depression, burnout for healthcare workers. And she quickly ramped up with Mount Sinai Hospital in New York City, and now has over 70 of these recharge rooms in hospitals around the country, including Banner. Banner is in Phoenix and in
right.
And we have 2 here at the Banner hospitals. And we have one at the Andrew Weil Center. And we're doing research with Studio Elsewhere and Mount Sinai Hospital. And what they are finding, what we're finding, is that there's a dose effect of being in these nature spaces that helps reduce stress and enhance sleep and enhance well-being. And that's 15 minutes a day. If you spend 15 minutes a day in this kind of immersive nature environment, of course, in real nature if you can, but if not in this environment, then your stress response is reduced, your burnout is less, you sleep better, and you have better moods. You're less depressed.
Right.
So there are all these kinds of features that you can add to spaces to help people flourish.
Excellent. Yes, super important. You said Star Mountain was your
Star Mountain LLC. Yes.
Excellent. Are you partnering with anybody on those, or are you just doing it as a completely external consultant?
No, I have a network. You talked about networks. I have a very large network around the country and around the world. So when I advise an organization, I pull in the right expertise, lighting expertise or building science expertise, my colleagues from the GSA who've retired from there. So yes.
So are you a partner designing these on these projects?
In some cases, yes, advising. Cool. The same way. Well, what we did with the center was, I stood up this committee, which included my colleagues from the GSA and architects, Dean of the College of Architecture and architects from the faculty, expert in different aspects, landscape architecture. That's how we got the idea for the mesquite trees. Sustainability. It's very important to balance health design for sustainable design. As I said, designing for health can counter sustainable design, but there's ways to balance it. And then there's post-COVID design. So yes, I have a network of experts across the country who I bring into different projects.
Very cool. Excellent. All right. Dr. Esther Sternberg, if somebody would like to connect with you or learn more about what we've been talking about, where can they go? What should they do?
Well, my website is www.esthersternberg.com, and the Star Mountain LLC is a page on that website. My books are listed on that website. All things like podcasts, and this will be on that website as well. So it's ESTHER Sternberg STERNBERG.com. And they can find out any of this information there.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening and watching. Thank you very much, Dr. Sternberg, for joining us today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Inspired by our guests? Visit PhoenixProsperityPodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.